Thank you, John.
We are rejoined by Lincoln Mitchell. He is the national political correspondent for the New York Observer, and Tara Dowdell. She is a political and business marketing consultant. Tara, I'm going to start with you, something that you pointed out. You said you are seeing a moderation in Donald Trump already, a Trump pivot, moving to the middle. Aside from saying, oops, my bad, I didn't mean what I said, can he pivot away from the positions that he has taken?
I think we've already started to see him, as I stated, see him move. I wouldn't say he's moving to the middle, but what I will say is that he's moderating his tone. Last night, we heard him very clearly say, African Americans. I'm going to be helpful to African Americans. Before it was the blacks. And so now it's African Americans. We also heard him strike a more conciliatory tone last night. He was far more humble, saying, this is a great honor of my life. I'm just so honored that you
But haven't we seen this before, and then he gets attacked by somebody like Marco Rubio and the claws come out and the battle is on again? The
only other time we saw this was following Iowa when he lost. And so he was, I think, blindsided by that loss. It was very different, but his tone was still, he still had that sort of that nastiness. And I think he'll still have that when he's attacked because he's thin-skinned. That's no question. But what I'm referring to is how he talks about people, how he relates to different people. I think you're going to see a softening of his tone. And I said this yesterday. I think you're going to see him start to make stronger, clearer distinctions about, oh, no. I don't have a problem with Mexicans. I have problem with people who come here illegally. I think you're going to see him make that distinction far more clearly, more strikingly moving forward.
I think what you saw last night with both of the front runners, Hillary Clinton as well, is both of these candidates with an eye toward the general election trying to look presidential at this point.
I would agree with that. I think it comes more naturally from Ms. Clinton. For Donald Trump, Tara's right. He is trying to make this pivot. The question for him is this somebody who has the discipline to do it, who can sustain it? The evidence of the last, 40 years suggests that perhaps he doesn't have those things.
Does that end up helping him in an election where maybe the outsider ends up having the edge?
The core of the Trump appeal is, I'm the guy that never apologizes. I'm the guy that never gives in to that kind of pressure. So he's got to be very careful about it. However, he can use code words and racial code words a little more elegantly.
But if you are a voter, you may buy into these arguments that he is softening his stance. But if you're the GOP establishment, are you going to buy a more moderate, a softer, gentler, kinder, gentler Donald Trump, Tara? Are you going to buy into the fact that this may be your nominee, or are you going to fight Donald Trump all the way to the convention?
They're going to fight Donald Trump, but be very clear, behind closed doors, what they're saying is they don't believe that Trump believes what he's saying. That is the dominant thinking of most people close to.
So what will that do to the people that do believe what Donald Trump is saying?
Well, that's the great irony here, because he claims not to be a politician, but everything that Donald Trump is doing is classic politician behavior. He supports universal health care, has been on record supporting universal health care, gun safety laws. There's a myriad of things. He was very praising of both Hillary Clinton as Secretary of State as well as President Obama in his upon his initial election. So Donald Trump is a flip-flopper. His supporters are so hardened that it does not matter. And for those who are aware of the things the polling shows, some of them are aware of all of these, shortcomings, right? They're aware of it, and they've said it doesn't matter.
I want to just take a second to talk about Bernie Sanders. Okay. What happened to Bernie Sanders? Because coming out of New Hampshire, which was Clinton territory, and he won that by a miles, it looked like he was going to have some momentum. He's somebody that has been consistent with his message, and yet he's really floundering in the rest of these contests.
I'm not sure he's floundering. I don't think it's over for Bernie Sanders yet. I think it's the eighth inning, and he's down by 2 runs, if I can make a baseball analogy. But,
even though he lost Massachusetts, which is sort of the bastion of liberal progressivism?
But he lost it by like 1 or 2 delegates, right?
That's true.
I think if you're sitting in Brooklyn in the Clinton headquarters today, you're saying, we ran into a great candidate that we weren't expecting. I think that's wrong. I think Sanders, actually, this was a winnable primary for him. And the main reason for that is that the primary electorate within the Democratic Party, particularly those where people are white, have moved so far left since 1992, when Bill Clinton was nominated by the party, that his message of kind of radical economic justice really does resonate. Similarly, his message of a much less hawkish foreign policy also resonates. The reason Bernie Sanders is not in a stronger position, and I would argue that he's made some very serious campaign mistakes, is that he's unable to make the critique of Clinton's foreign policy because he didn't bother to make himself basically fluent in the language and the discussions of foreign policy. Didn't do his work. When you start talking about the CIA overthrowing Mohammad Mossadegh in a debate, look, that is a relevant point in a history seminar. However, you sound like that crazy left-wing dude on the back of the bus in San Francisco when I was growing up. You know,
and you're also calling yourself a democratic socialist, and it's questionable how many Democrats.
But I think actually he spun that beautifully, right? The now socialists, after decades of red baiting, now it's kind of a good thing. The other thing is this: Sanders is not a racist. Sanders has a very admirable record on civil rights. It's never been a front and center priority. But if he was serious about winning a Democratic nomination in 2016, he should have been spending time in African-American communities in 2012, 13, and 14, and he wasn't. And now what he's doing is he's saying it's the establishment. The problem is African-American leadership, and he'd know this if he'd spent enough time there, feel that they've worked very hard to become part of that.
Might be a case of him having too narrow of a message.
And not doing his work.
Consistent, but not broad enough.
To be
Lincoln
continued.
and Tara, we will leave it there and see you again at the bottom of the hour. Thank you.
Now, one of the reasons this is also important is